just wanted to say hello to everybody and welcome you all to today's workshop titled Expanding on the Issue of Violence Against Women, which is being facilitated by Verna McGregor, who we're extremely grateful to have here with us today. So we're really honored to have you joining us today and grateful to you for supporting the Moosehide Campaign. My name is Ethan Boyer, and I work for the Moosehide Campaign as an outreach engagement officer, and I'm based out of Ontario. So today I'm joining you all from the traditional territory of the Mississauga and Anishinaabe in present-day Toronto. And in this acknowledgement, I want to offer gratitude to the Mississauga for their care and teachings about the earth and all our relations. And as we're all participating today from different parts of Turtle Island, I encourage you all to take some time to familiarize yourself with which traditional territory you're residing in, and include that knowledge and learning in your space today as we ground ourselves in this day of ceremony. So before we begin and before I pass it off to Verna, I'd like to go over just a few housekeeping notes with everybody. So during this session, everybody's mics will remain muted and the general chat function is off. So if you have any questions or any concerns at all, you can message me directly in the chat. So my name's Ethan Boyer there. So if you go through Find Me, it'll just send it directly to me, and I'll bring your questions forward to Verna, and we'll do our best to answer as many of your questions as we can before the end of the workshop. And throughout this session, it's really important that everybody in this call be treated kindly and act respectfully. So any inappropriate behavior, will result in removal from this call. And if anyone is in need of assistance at any time during this session, as I said before, you can message me directly. And you can also visit our events microsites wellness center, which has a list of support resources. And this can be found at the following link, which Derek is just going to post in the chat for us now. And then at the end of the workshop, I'll be posting 2 questions onto the screen for your feedback. And we'd be really grateful if you could take a moment to answer these questions and just send your responses to me in the chat. But we'll get to that a little later. But for now, it's my great pleasure to introduce you to Verna McGregor. Verna is from the Algonquin First Nation community of Gitaganzibi, which is approximately 120 kilometers north of Ottawa, Ontario. Ottawa and Gatineau form part of the Algonquin Nation's traditional unceded lands. And Verna has remained really firmly grounded in her community and nation by also being a part of the group of traditional grandmothers and elders there. And this includes the promotion and retention of the Algonquin language and culture, which is so important when addressing issues from a cultural perspective for Verna. And with that, I want to offer a very warm welcome to Verna, and I'll pass it on to you, Verna. I'll share my screen here for you.
Okay, miigwech. No, miigwech, Ethan. Hello, everybody. Kwekakina. As Ethan said, Verna, Nidishnikas, Kitakansi, Jabawa, Gushnido, Damashichunim Kipanesi. I'm very honored to be here. I don't know if we have any French speakers in the audience, but say bienvenue. Pija Goshe, Nongo. So yeah, I thank you, Ethan, for and the Moosehide Campaign for bringing me back another year. Actually, I've been here since the inception of the Moosehide Campaign. I guess I keep coming back. First of all, before we start, I lit a smudge for all you people out there who are fasting. Send you great strength to continue your fast. And it's good that you're also given your fasting is good. We did this every season. And we don't do that enough anymore because it also physically, it gives your what they call a biome today, a rest, because we're always eating everything and our stomachs are always processing things. But also it's a cleansing, and it's a cleansing too as well to bring in the new. So on that note, I have a little tobacco here and I lit a smudge and I say, Miigwech, Ojene Gashkito Jama Dose Koshe Nongo. Mama kakina pamad sa chik dashi fast me don and now because fastation kodekia organisha mo. We do kwa kakina, miigwech kajemane donje kakina, mom de gain in the kimanan, shashki. Skaki question cause on in the kimanan, we do kwa kakina pamazi, chicken is what gonche nongo. Miigwech onje kakina, I take keys gon keys, is to be keys, is a shit nong shak miigwech onje nenokumisnan, onje kakina, nibi. Dashi nagdoab nan, mom de gay, nibi pang sing, CB, saigan kichigagam. Miigwech ya ishkude kakimi jin chimino opchitoyan widokwa kakina ninwak onje nagadowabandan kakina guchia ishkude. Mamdike hikwewa gashich onje nagadowabandan kakina guch nibi. Miigwech na seven kakimi jin chimino opchitoyan chimino pamatsian. Widokwa kakina mamdike dashi akusa chik mami ya COVID-19 jin kadeke shich kakina akusa Kanshishkwat nigwe de simen kego gajemana doshish kana noj kush nigwe de simen we do kwa kakina mam de ge we wis na jig de mag za jig ya ka sa jig kaye we giwe jig shwen mishnon miigwech. And I'm going to explain miigwech is thank you in Algonquin, merci en français. And why I say that 4 times. I'm going to explain that to you as I get on to my little medicine wheel presentation. So, Ethan is my page turner these days, which is my PowerPoint presentation. I like PowerPoints too, as well, because I don't like looking at myself on the screen while I talk. But PowerPoints are really interesting too, as well, because I like to use pictures too, because we're very expressive people too, as well. And I think also a picture says 1,000 words. And yes, he put my picture back on the screen, that Ethan, when I said that. Okay, so next, please. I'll go to my next slide. When I say Kwe, and I'm trying to teach you a little bit Algonquin while we're online here. My mother started the Algonquin language program back in the 60s. She saw to as well the language was disappearing and the dire need for retention. And I'm going to explain why too, as well, with all that's happened to us. Even our own people didn't want to save the language, and it was this programming of colonization, really. So anyway, I say Kwe Minwashin Lodge Nindanaki. I say hello, Kwe. I work at Minwashin Lodge, which is the Indigenous Women's Support Center here in Ottawa. We have a violence mandate, and I've been here which is amazing, for 11 years now, and I deliver the employment and training. And some of my former students, I think, are online here. I saw one. Hi, Beth. And but part of my background too, as well, is I studied economics I came to school here in Ottawa and left a reserve because my mother saw that also education was the way for our future for her kids. But it was really hard because we would come to school here in the week during the week, and we returned back to the reserve on the weekends. And my mother, it took this very hard, but she knew it was also for our own good. So we finished high school here and went on to university in Ottawa. And I studied economics and was kind of curious about that coming from the reserve. And so then after I got out of school, I went to work for Indian Affairs for a while, but I didn't stay there too long. I worked there in capital management. And I, I, I was thinking of that too, as well. As the geez, people are very miserable working in the federal government at time. But there was also a lot of racism. Even myself, I would get comments in the department itself, and they were very angry racism. And now things have changed quite a bit, and there's more awareness. And I think that's why we're here too today, and that's why I honor you too as well for participating in the Moosehide Campaign. So then I went on, and I went to, of all things, sell real estate in Ottawa, and which was very rare because coming from the reserve too, I didn't know anything about housing, but a friend of mine said, come on, we'll teach you. And then from there, I went on to banking. And then I worked for the Royal Bank. And then I realized, geez, we've been left out of this whole financial field, not only getting mortgages for housing, but lending, banking on reserve. So this opportunity came up with the Assembly First Nations and Economic Development. And so I applied for it and got the job and worked on national issues. And it was a lot of national issues at that time. But at that same time, the Royal Commission on Aboriginal People was going on, and that stemmed from the Oka crisis, which maybe some of you weren't born then when the Oka crisis happened in Oka, Quebec. And this led to the Royal Commission on Aboriginal People to study why there were so many issues with um, Native people, Aboriginal people. And from there, that what stemmed from there too as well was all the stories started to come out even more about the residential school and the trauma, in addition to the research they were doing in terms of treaties, co-management. But I think one of the biggest that came out of this is the impact of residential school. So I worked there and then sort of got burned out and had to take time off, went back home, but came back and worked on this National Aboriginal Financing Task Force. Because while I was at the AFN, I said, well, why can't we have our own banking system, our own looking into banking, access to capital? And that led to this task force. And then the task force again, I had my son. And so I wanted to move back home to when, and uh, and that's what I did. And I became the ECDEV officer for Kitagon Zibi, which is, as Ethan mentioned, 120 kilometers north of here. And then, and one of my biggest projects there was also the maple syrup, which is tied to the women's water teachings too. And so, and then left and came back and did different contracts with various organizations. And one of the organizations that I started with, now this was stepping out into the social area of things, was this National Aboriginal Circle on Family Violence and Violence Against Women. And they dealt with the shelters, the women's shelters on reserve. So the first day I started there, I went to a conference with NAHO, which is at that time was called the National Aboriginal Health Organization. And they had an elders conference on family violence. And one of the biggest things that I pulled from there with the elders, they said that as we're providing services for the women and children leaving violence, like you have the shelters and we have the court systems, the housing. What are we doing for the men to heal them also as abusers? And because the men are hurting too and are in need of healing. Because what happens with the system is we throw the men in jail and we don't deal with the root cause of the anger, the need for healing. Instead, sometimes they learn more skills and they come out with more skills for violence and then end up back in the system. So again, too, as well, I found that really profound too, as well. And so anyway, that started this whole National Aboriginal Circle. And then I left the National Aboriginal Circle. I stayed there for about 2 years or 3 years. And in 2008, I left the circle basically because I was burnt out because it was like a two-person office. And I went home for the summer and it was like this. I stayed home June, July, and August came around and my son went back to school. And I was thinking, oh, this is so nice, no more violence, because it was pretty heavy. I would have families calling me, asking for help to try and find their missing and murdered relatives, their daughters, their children. And I always thought, I remember one time crying in the office and saying, I don't know what I would do if this was my daughter and or my child that went missing. So anyway, what happened is I was home on in September, came around in Sheldon. My son Sheldon started back at school. And then 2 days later, on September 6th, he comes in and he goes, Mom, he goes, the police were at the school. They said that Maisie and Shannon, which he grew up with Maisie because they were always together um, with Maisie and Sheldon because they were born around the same time. And I used to keep Maisie. She said that Maisie's missing and Shannon, and they just think they ran away. But I sort of, the pit of my stomach dropped, and I said, "Oh my God, it's happened here too. It can't be." You go into denial, but then 5 days turned into weeks, turned into months, and to this day too as well. We don't really know what happened to them. They've never been found. So this has been like now 13 years. So this started on our own trauma here too as well, even more so. And so then along at that time too as well, I was looking for a job again. I said I better go back to work, and so I took this other contract with the National Aboriginal Forestry Association with their database and their website, and then this job came up at Minwashin, and that's where I work with today, Minwashin Lodge. And why I like it too as well is they provide a wraparound service for the women. So it's not just the ways, it has the shelter, but it also has the counseling. We have like a crisis counselor, addictions counselor. We have also the art therapists for the children too. Uh, and again too as well, we have like the Sacred Child program, which works with the Children's Aid Society and the children and the parents. And then we have a transition worker who helps the women, and a housing first worker helps the women find housing after they've left their violent relationship. So again, here we are. And what I do is when the women are stronger too as well, and it's not just women coming through this shelter, it was other women on an urban, and depending on our funding availability, we provide employment and training. And again, too, it's a form of a wraparound empowerment. So here I am, and this is our logo here on the picture. You'll see that too as well. Minwashin means um, like a good guiding spirit. Our formal salutation in Algonquin is Minwashinada. Washin is like the wind, and Minnow is good, like a good wind. But for us, the wind is a spirit. And when we say Minwashinada, really means may good spirits go with you. And so, but Minwashin Lodge is a good spirit, a good helping spirit lodge. So that's I think the beauty of the language too as well. It's very expressive, and I think that's part of healing too, is understanding the beauty of languages. That because especially the native languages, how there was such a push to erase them, and a really a shame to speak the language too, because that was the goal, was the erasing of the languages. Next, please. So before we start to as well, I said your self-reflection from the Moosehide fast. I did this last year too. I said by participating in a fast for the Moosehide campaign, first of all, I congratulate you for taking the time to self-reflect and raise awareness on the issue of gender-based violence. But I think you're very brave to go to fast, no, to go whole day without food. But again, too, as well, we used to do this seasonally. And again, it's given your body a rest, but also to learn new things too, and to contemplate. So I said, so in addition to the commitment of the Moosehide campaign, is there anything else you can do in the next year? That's your challenge too as we go through this presentation. Is there anything you can do in the next year to also heal, or we call women the life givers because we bring in the next generation, but also too as well, can we heal our biggest giver, which is Mother Earth? And I have a little picture of Earth Mother, which is made of plants, which was part of a display a couple of years ago here on the Gatineau side in Ottawa. And in this time of self-reflection too, maybe too, as well as thinking too, as well, is there any other skills I would like to explore in the next year? And I always think about that too, as well, because for me too, sometimes I come to Ottawa from Kitagan-Zibi, and lately I've been listening to podcasts, which I found really empowering because they have also these self-help um, podcasts, and that's part of healing too, as well, to reprogram ourselves, but also too, as well, as you're driving, is learning, but also changing your your mindset too, as well. So that's what I was just thinking of too, as well, as we're going through, because it is a time of self-reflection. Next, please. So I'm going to start my little spiel. I do a lot of openings here in Ottawa, and as I said last year too, I don't know if people were here from last year too as well, but for us as Native people, Indigenous people, we called North America Turtle Island. I always like that. Welcome to Fantasy Island. I said, so I guess the Algonquin, when they were saying seeing the explorers get out of the ships, we'd say, welcome to Turtle Island instead of welcome to Fantasy Island. But I got this off of Facebook too, so I apologize. But I like it though. It's how did the ancestors know America looked like a turtle? And that's where we call this Mikinak Minising, and it was always this oral history that it was always passed down, that oh, you know, this Mikanak menacing that, and that's part of our creation story, which I'll touch on really quickly later, but also Turtle Island, and that North America is like the turtle, it's shaped like a turtle, and there's big longer teachings to that. But for us too as well, there's the turtle's back, and there's 13 shells. If you ever look at the turtle next time, if you run out after your fast, go try and look for turtles, uh, and you'll see on the back there's 13 shells, and that's tied to, for example, they said that there's 13 grandmother teachings, but there's also the 13 for us. They had the Gregorian calendar, but for us too as well, we had also the 13 moon cycles. There's actually 13 moons in the year, and that's also representative on the turtle's back, and on the sides there represent also part of the governance and the Senate, and the interconnection of everything. So that's why we say welcome to Turtle Island, by the way. Next, please. And again, too, as well, really quickly, um, part of the colonization is it was very Christian based, but we also had our own creation stories, and they vary from nation to nation. Um, but for us too, as well, it started with the creation of the universe. And really quickly, the story was that the creator, he or she, was asleep and had this dream, this vision of the universe and the star systems and the moon and the sun and the planet with, for example, the Earth. They envisioned on Earth all the plants, all the animals, all the insects, the water, the stones, the trees. So when the creator or the great mystery awoke, they recreated that vision. And as you're creating all the creatures on the earth, he made also human beings last. And if you look at it too, we haven't been on this earth that long. And And one of the things to one of our teachings is that we are gifted with language and reason. And for us as Algonquins too as well, our stories are tied to as well. This creation story was tied to also the Wiskejak, or they call him Nanabush, which is the trickster. And he would come down and teach the people, but also too as well. He was sort of a trickster too and a jokester, and he would almost like shoot himself in the foot as a teaching too as well, not to take yourself too seriously here too, because life is meant to be enjoyed. In addition to as well, we also had our Haudenosaunee brothers and sisters also had their own creation story of the Sky Woman, and they sort of connect with each other because it's that balance. Sometimes I think too as well with the male female. And our creation story was also too as well that with the creation of Turtle Island that. The trickster gave a challenge to the animals to dive down and bring up earth for the creation of the continent. And the animal that rose to the occasion of all animals was the muskrat. And again, too, as well, what does that teach is that also to every animal has its gift, as also too as well, um, every person that comes here has their own gifts, their own challenges. So that's the power of story. Next, please. So again, here we are. We were living on Turtle Island. We had our skirmishes between tribes. We were very nomadic as Algonquin people too, and Cree, and we weren't static. We were very mobile on this Turtle Island too. But and then so I always think about this too as well, because then if they foretold also the coming, there were stories of foretelling the coming of the newcomers, the light-skinned race to Turtle Island here, and here we are. But we have this seven fire prophecy, and it foretold the people coming here, but also there would be we will end up at two roads. But I always like it to starting at prior to contact, and I like this too as well. um, it shows the devastation that happened, that the discovery of America was followed by possibly the greatest demographic disaster in the history of the world. Research by some scholars provides a population estimates of pre-contact Americas to be as high as 112 million in 1492. That's when Columbus came. He discovered America, even though there was probably 112 million. While others estimate the population to have been as low as 8 million because they don't know. There was no census back then or Google Earth. In any case, the native population declined to less than 6 million by 1650. And so again, too, as well, uh, this climate change, one of the theories too, as well, is that because of the a quick decrease in population in North America, that there was it caused a mini ice age at that time too as well, because of the change in population. Next, please. I'm going to take a break to at the slide and in the next couple of slides, so you can move around and get something to drink, go to the washroom. So again, too, as well, I'm coming to you from Ottawa, Gatineau. And for us as Algonquin people, we are known as the Omamaninawag, meaning the nomads, or I think it's like more like a wandering. It wasn't wandering though, too, as well, because it was very complex. It seems simple, but it was also complex, because when I say Kwe for an indigenous cause, but I say, well, Sejesi, an indigenous cause, well, Krishna-do, Demashicho, Nimkipanesi. That would be our introduction prior to contact. You would introduce your name, but also too as well your clan system on your mother and your father's side. Why? Because our clan system was based on the watershed. We were known for the birch bark canoe because of all the tributaries around here. And we were not agricultural as much as the Haudenosaunee or Iroquois were more agricultural because they were more southern. And for us, because of the terrain, we were known for the hunting and gathering. And we would have trade, though, with other nations. And that's seen too as well if you see the archaeological digs, even in Ottawa here, and they're seen all around down the Ottawa River. And the significance of Ottawa is that you're at the confluence of the rivers coming together from the four directions. And this oral stories is that we would meet here in the summer and talk about what's going on the land, on the watershed, because it was a system of land management. But also too as well, we would have gatherings, and that's why powwow comes from is powawashike, meaning uh, after they had harsh winters here. It's less harsh now with this climate change. We would have harsh winters, but in the summer, um, you would shake off the winter. And how you say how old are you in Algonquin is Aninendeso Pibonesian. Pibon is winter. They'd ask, how many winters have you survived? So in the summer or in the spring when they'd gather, this was powwow shige, meaning powwow, that's where powwow comes from, is shaking off the winter. And you shaking it off too with the dancing. And also why we would have gatherings too as well is that it was a time for the young people to meet to meet new partners, to intermarry, because that understanding too as well is that if you don't intermingle, then the the gene pool today they call it the gene pool uh, gets weaker. So it's to strengthen the uh, the people really, and they knew that it was so that's why they would meet too, but also talk about other things during what happened during the winter. So today, um, as this colonization happened too with the creation of the reserves, where you weren't allowed to lead, that impacted too as well this intermingling and understanding. Next, please. It's interesting though too as well, going back to the Chaudière and the rivers at that confluence, that I find it funny that the Parliament Hill is located at that confluence today, and that confluence of the rivers is similar to the medicine wheel, and at the center of the medicine wheel, which I'll talk about in a little few minutes, is also the need for balance because there's many teachings to that. Again, too, I just have a picture here of the Chaudière Falls in Ottawa. For those of you who've been to Ottawa or live in Ottawa, the falls were so powerful that you could hear them about 4 miles away. That's in Samuel de Champlain's diaries. Well, today they put the dams on there. There's a dam there, so you don't hear the falls as much. And plus, we have a lot of urban traffic, so you'd hear the buses more than the falls. Next, please. Again, too, as well, for those of you who've seen this before, it's a medicine wheel and it's many teachings. It teaches us about the need for balance, as I mentioned earlier, like even with our why we meet at the confluence, is you honor the contrast, such as you see the top is white, the bottom is for south, north and south is cold in the north, warm in the south. You have the east, which is in yellow, and the west, which is the dark. Some people use navy or blue because it represents the sun coming up in the east and going down in the west. It represents the four medicines. You have cedar, tobacco, sweetgrass, and sage. It represents also too as well your journey here, and you are on a learning journey today with your fast and listening to me. If you learn anything, I hope you do. But our understanding is on the north is spirit. So you come from spirit. You come from your ancestors and people that love you and creator. And you take your first breath, which is between you'll see the start of the yellow on the medicine wheel. It's your first breath to start your earth journey here as an infant, turning into a toddler, to an adult, a youth, a preteen, teen, youth, youth. Then you transition into adulthood, in becoming a parent, adulthood, if you're lucky, if you're inclined to. If not, that's good too. And then in preparation also too as well, if you're gifted that too as well, to become elderly as a grandparent, a great grandparent, in return back to, in preparation to return back to spirit, back to your ancestors that love you. It's interesting too as well. I like it too as well. I like the transition that your hair starts to turn white too in preparation, but also to so that's where your earth journey is, and everybody's on this journey. The other interesting thing about this goes back to our creation story, and again too as well, when the creator created the earth, he created the four colors of people. This is our story here, and again to every nation's story is different, but this is what I was told even as a little girl by my parents, is that the creator, she created the four colors of people and gave them their lands too, but they all got the original teachings of to be caretakers of the earth. And for example, you have the white, the north, it represented the white people, and the white people were made from the foam of the water. That was the teaching. And so, but they were given the responsibility of caretakers of the water. And then the yellow people was from there's a birch story, and their also responsibility is the caretaking of the air, which is the Asian people. And the black people, again, it was that they were made from the dark earth, and their responsibility was the caretaking of the animals. And the red people, the red earth people, were given the responsibility of also the caretaking of the earth. And so I said, so how we've progressed here, I don't think we've been doing a very good job. So it's good that we have this Moosehide discussion. So the other part of this too, now it also represents, and this is something you can think about when you're fasting today, it represents as an individual, your emotional, physical, spiritual, and mental health. And as you're fasting, maybe it's thinking about, um, am I in balance with my emotional, physical, spiritual, and mental? Is there things that I need to, have I been neglecting something like my physical health? Meaning, did I need exercise? Should I exercise more in the next year? What's achievable for me? My spiritual, maybe I want to explore other um, religions, spirituality. Um, the mental is again learning. I want courses in whatever it is you're interested in. And your emotional is also too as well. Is there things that I need to release that are making me angry, that really sadden me? And what do I need to release in order to bring back my own well-being? So again too as well, that's your own journey, but it's also too as well, that's what the medicine wheel reminds us of too as well, because the center always represents balance. It also represents children, and the center represents also that we're here for the next 7 generations. That's why we have to heal ourselves, because we just pass on that trauma. Next, please. And again, too, as well. So with that, too, with that balance, again, here comes our teaching for us again, and a lot of other Anishinaabe nations believe that women are keepers of the waters and men are keepers of the fire. I always say that because I do a lot of talks these days about diversity And diversity starts with the male, female, that um, although our roles were different, it didn't mean one was superior to the other, that the male, female balance each other to bring in the next generation. And I always get to talk to us, well, what about the two spirit, the two, um, 2SL, LGBTQT? And I said, well, it goes back to the medicine wheel too again. We all come here with our own um, things to learn, our own experiences, our own being. That and what they elders say is that, and the understanding is that everybody belongs in the circle, because and it's honoring everybody's journey here, and their right to well-being really, and prosperity. So anyway, so why are women keepers of the waters is also too, as well as that understanding also, even of all things, the most sacred in life is new life. And when you're bringing in new life, the child is surrounded by water. And to bring in new life, you break the water, just like that's why I use the stream there. That's one of our sacred sites, really, by Kitagon Zibi. That's called Windigo Falls. And we have a story of that, of the trickster, and it was his sliding place. And the other one is men are keepers of the fire. And again, there's fire teachings. And the fire teachings are also to connected like the sun. The sun shines equally on everybody, but it's also necessary for life. But also too as well, there's your internal fire, but also the internal fire of the earth. So there's that contrast. And how do you balance that contrast of differences, but yet still have unity? And that's where this understanding of balance comes in. And next, please. So now, coming back to our recent history, we have a history of colonialism and trauma. For us as the Algonquin, we met, I call him Samuel de Champlain in Tadoussac in 1604. He left France to set out on the Great Sea as to become a famous explorer. The only problem when we met the famous explorer and his crew, they were starving and they were sick. So we brought them medicine and food to heal themselves. And one of the things, though, when they came here, they saw the abundance of resources, and it started with the cod fishery, that you could just throw apparently a bucket in the water and you didn't need a net or anything, and you'll pull up the fish. That's how abundant they were. There was another story, for example, like John Cabot. Apparently, he thought he hit a tree in the water, or he hit what do they call that in the on the shore, but it was there was so many fish that the boat hit the fish and they couldn't go any further. So that's how abundant the resources were. So it started with the cod fishery. Then they looked around at the timber resources here. There was the old growth forest. The old growth forest today is like, oh, you have something that's 200 years old or 100 years old. But the old growth back then, I think, was probably like 500 to 1,000 years old. So the trees were big. So this area also experienced the largest harvesting of trees in the world, and since contact, because they used them to build the ships for France and England in Europe. Then came the fur trade, and that caused also the wars, especially for us too, between the Iroquois and the Algonquin, the Mi'kmaq, Maliseet. Um, for then it was the start of this capitalism and the capitalist system, and which led to this great peace gathering in 1701 with the nations. But here we are, and then came the mineral resources, and with the timber came also the start of also the hydro, and with the, for example, the Ottawa River watershed today, there's 52 dams, and again that impacted the fish. So with that too as well, now we were allies and very helpful to the explorers, but we soon became a nuisance because they wanted the lands and resources for the crowns, on behalf of the crown. So in 1763, there was also this royal proclamation, which is the Royal Proclamation of 1763. It set out the core elements of the relationship between First Nations and the Crown, and established a recognition of First Nations rights in Canada, and laid the foundation of treaty making process. So that's why these treaties were made. For us, we didn't sign treaty in Ottawa, which is kind of Ottawa Gatineau, the big Algonquin Ottawa River watershed, and which was amazing too. But here we are. And what does that mean too as well? So now they're trying to close that gap with the land claims today, which modern land claims. But again too as well, um, basically it says you need a treaty with the First Nation in order to resources. So here we are. Next, please. How are we doing on time? Okay, I'm gonna hurry it up because I want to. Okay, and here we are again. You go for us too as well. There was the creation of the Indian Act in 1876 after this royal proclamation, and the creation of the reserves for us in 1853. Kitagon-Zibi was established, but we also had pandemics are not new for us and everybody else to the world. We had smallpox, we had the Spanish flu, and when there was TB too, a lot of our ancestors were taken away to TB sanatoriums. Smallpox, though, too, as well. I always thought that we were exempt from the smallpox blankets, being given smallpox blankets to Indians to spread smallpox. But there was this memo found even a couple of years ago in the archives about the Indian agent reporting back that he delivered the blankets to our community. And we're finding the Indians dead by basketong, but he was asking for direction because we weren't dying fast enough on reserve. So that's part of the impact of this colonization. People don't know that in the past, with the creation of the reserve system too as well, they had the pass system. So you needed a permit to leave the reserve, and you needed a permit to return to the reserve. And this was done by the Indian agent. So why did they do that too? Part of it is they were giving away the lands and resources, even though they were unceded, they gave them away. But also too as well, it prevented the parents, and for me, I'm a grandmother now, I want to go get my grandchild.
You can sit and watch this if you want. It's actually live, it's a live workshop.
Yeah, anyway, that as a grandparent to go collect your child and grandchild at residential school. The other one is you didn't know that post-secondary education, you need to enfranchise to attend university or college. This was removed out of the Indian Act. They say 1965, but it was like 1956. But really, it was still around because and other restrictions, you weren't allowed to retain legal counsel. And so it was only the early 60s that these restrictions were taken away. And so my parents lived through that too, because my mother was the first to go back, one of the first to go back to try to go to university. Well, people have been going to university for ages if you were non-native. The residential school system, again, the taking of children, a lot were lost to TB, but it wasn't TB, it was also abuse, even outright murder, as you're finding now the graves. The first school started in 1831, but the official system was in 1883, which has led to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission report. I always find this now, here we are, 2016, which is 5 years ago. And that's here we are now on this reconciliation, which I'm glad you're here too as well, fasting today. There's other things we've been impacted with, like, and again, here we are today, the murdered and missing Indigenous women's issue. we think it's an ongoing issue. I thought maybe there's more awareness of murdered and missing women. We have the 2 missing girls back home. We still have the big billboard. But last week there was 2 unknown people in our community, and they were trying to lure the children from our community. And now, we were up in arms. But again, too, as well. But it wasn't an isolated incident. Then the story came out. There was other incidents last year and the year before of people coming in and trying to scoop the children. Oh, luckily, we're more on guard. But again, too, as well. That's why I think we need sessions like this and an awareness. There's the 60 scoop. The 60 scoop was also the taking away of the children with social services. My parents didn't go to residential school. They went to the Indian Day School on reserve, which was just as harsh, although they got to go home at night. And there's still an issue of the sterilization of Native women, which was also to eliminate the race, really. And today too as well with Dr. Cindy Blackstock, we have this Human Rights Tribunal on child welfare. So all these pressures on us, and I think too as well that's why we need this awareness. Next, please. The other thing too as well, while we had them on, we were on reserves. There was a confiscation of our sacred items, and I always talk about these. These are the wampum belts. One of them, there was other items. There's so many other items. At one time too as well, there were stories where even today, if there was a fast, we were fasting together and having a drum, even having powwows. Not too long ago was outlawed even in Kitagon-Zibi, which is 120 miles north of here. We only brought back our powwow in 1986, because I remember as a little girl, we have Elder William Commanda in this picture at the bottom. He had powwows at Biddiby Lake, and all Indians would come from all over, even Turtle Island. And then when I was about 6 years old, this is in the late 60s, the police were there. And so, yeah, the Bethany's said too as well, and Womenji too, it was outlawed. Yeah, until recently. So we're still coming out of this oppression and this reconciliation, even in ceremony. So we were very lucky. There's other wampum belts too that ended up, they were confiscated and ended up in museums. The masks, other items, the ceremonial items, they were confiscated. And anytime there was a story where they tried to have a gathering in the bush in our community, and the RCMP showed up, there would be a snitch in the community and the police would show up. And yeah, so we're coming out of, I was just saying that to last weekend because we had a ceremony for the residential school survivors and the children. And I said, we're just also at this point of healing too. We're still very early in our healing, but we're also bringing other people along with our healing, because the elders say, I think we all need healing. We need to heal ourselves because look at what we're doing to the earth. And that's what they were having. That's what the elder was trying to say in the bottom picture here, where they had this gathering called the Cry of the Earth, that the people, we can blame the people coming here. Also what happened, yes, there's a certain point where you have to take responsibility for that too, what was done. But he said too, if you really, really look at it too, a lot of people who landed on our shores, like Samuel de Champlain, going back to this great explorer, what was going on in his country was there was religious wars and they were brutal. And and a lot of people who landed here, a lot of the priests that were that landed here, even at Lake of Two Mountains, were slated for the guillotine. Instead, they said, well, I'm running off to the New World. But a lot of people that have come here were escaping oppression and war. Look at today. We have the Ukraine and for refuge. And he said that But what happened is too, rather than understand our systems and learn why we do the things we did and live the way we did, they recreated the same system that they were coming from. And maybe there's still a learning to do because we need to heal ourselves because look at what we're doing to the earth. And the middle belt is called the seven fire prophecy belt. And you see the two diamonds in the middle? There's seven diamonds, but the middle diamond, there's it represents two roads. We're at a crossroads right now because it was foretold because of the system. And I think it's a capitalistic system sometimes too, that we overconsume to the point to the detriment of the next seven generations. And that's why you have the seven diamonds. And the other one is the sharing belt of 1701 with that gathering, and the understanding that there was supposed to be a sharing of the lands and resources in three equal parts, and that between brothers and sisters, which means too as well the British, Anishinaabe or Indian Native, and the French. So they had a cross in there too as well because the Vatican was involved, and they were trying to portray that of that sharing. And the other bottom belt is the J Treaty belt. And the understanding was that before contact, we had no borders. And look at the borders we have today. So it was our understanding, and it's that contrast, the European written word, while our covenants were like 3D, really. And you see that. They represent the oral history and understanding. And so today you see that if it isn't written, it doesn't have value. But we survived on this too prior to contact. Next, please. So I'm not going to come up to a break here. So during break, you can go take a 5-6 minute break with time at 1:57. Maybe we'll come back at 2:05. But as you're on break too as well, I'll just leave you with, we're going to go into the next section here is an elder once said, as we are addressing the violence against the life givers, which is women, violence against women, but also too as well, there is some violence against men. It's violence, period. Maybe this will, but as we become more aware of violence and addressing violence issues, maybe this will also lead to addressing the violence to the biggest life giver, which is Mother Earth, and the things that are done in violence in order to even access resources. Look at the war going on right now, which is sometimes it is over resources, and sometimes is it fear-based? I don't know. But anyway, I'm just going to leave you with that, and so we'll take a break and come back and take a stretch. Don't eat because you're fasting, but we'll come back at maybe 2:05. So I wish you a good break, and I'll see you soon. Miigwech. So this is how many years now with a Moosehide, and for us as Algonquin people, we see the moose as very sacred. And with the Moosehide Campaign, I was thinking about that, and I was thinking, ooh, because we've been talking moose for the last 3 years, even more so. Actually, my neighbor also tans the moosehide, and I don't know if anybody's ever been tanning moosehide, but you want to work out, it really works the muscles, and also too as well sometimes too. It don't smell very good if you, so I'm just pre-warning you if you want to tan moosehide. Some people, the first time they tan, they get really with the smell, but also the work to tan a moose and the moosehide. So that little square, if it's tanned, hand tanned, you realize how much work goes into preparing the moosehide. But about 3 years ago, the Algonquin Nation has lobbied in the last 3 years for a moratorium on the annual moose hunt. because a lot of the elders, and we still have elders who live in the bush. There's Barrier Lake in particular. Their community is in the middle of the Parc de la Vérendrye in Quebec, which is a big park, nature reserve. But they've seen the decline in moose in the last couple of years, and the province issues the licenses for the annual moose hunt, and so they successfully last year stopped the moose hunt in the park, but in return they said they have to allow the moose hunt to happen in there's the private outfitter areas in on private lands. So again, it was a step because what they're seeing is they said we're not seeing the moose that we did before. And part of that is, yes, it is probably over hunting, but also too as well, we're in climate change now. And the loss of not only loss of habitat, but also climate change. And they've seen moose and deer with the ticks. And again, because I think it's also the change in temperature. So, so that's why they asked for a moratorium. And the other part, though, too, as well, is I said that for us, hunting is very sacred. You there's a Nukkiwin. There's a Dumtawin, which means to work, and a Nukkiwin, which means to work. But a Nukkiwin means almost like to hunt or work with the land, a Kiwin. And you work with the land, so you hunt to sustain yourself. And they used to have, and they still do too, but ceremony prior to going on the hunt to ask the animal's permission, and that's where ceremony comes in, to hunt, to give up its life so that you sustain yourself. And there's a story of that where the animals gave up so that, because to have also to help man, human beings, because we weren't born with fur. You look at our skins, so we need also um, the animal fur and skins to survive. In addition to, in the harsh climate, it's nice to be a vegetarian. We honor you for doing that, but at the same time, too, in a harsh climate, being on the land, you need that protein too as well to survive when it's cold. So, so now when you hunt, it's you hunt respectfully. You only take what you need. And to honor the animal, they would do ceremony. They still do a lot, and a lot of the elders do. And to thank the animal for giving up its life, and to honor the animal, what you would do is you would use everything of that animal. So that's why when you would see, they'd have bones as necklaces, but also too as well, part of other parts of the animal was used for medicine, tools. The bones were also used for tools, in addition to the meat, in addition to the hide, because we were known for the hide, the buckskin in our clothing. You use it for your shelter, and then the tools for cooking. So it was also because to honor that and not take more than you need. So when I was looking at the little squares of the moose hide, when they started the campaign, I said that, oh, you've got to honor that. And I put my little square moose hide in my little where I keep all my other and I forgot it today, where I keep all my other, like my hair ties and things like that, because it's to honor the moose hide, because the animal gave its life to also teach through the Moosehide Campaign, like I'm here today. But also too as well now, because we for me, I sort of get upset too as well, because I see all these trucks with all their technology and going after the moose, like with the tracking. And I was thinking it's almost like a predator prey. It's like going after, it's almost like a trafficking, when they go out, like when I was talking about somebody going after our children or the women. And I think it's that mindset, and maybe we need to heal that mindset too, because also too as well, or when you're hunting to sustain your family too, they said that too as well. There's certain times you don't hunt because you allow the animals to repopulate. And an example too as well is you try not to hunt the cow moose. That if it's hunting season, then you hunt just the bull moose, the male, because the cow also reproduces. So when you take away one cow moose, you take away about 10 moose. So that impacts. The other part for us though too, we've seen this too, where because of the permit system and people coming in for sport hunting, they would just take the head and leave the rest of the body there. Uh, I'm thankful it doesn't happen anymore. There's more of an awareness, and again, that's why we have these gatherings too as well. It's just raising that awareness of the moose, and but there's a connection there with also women and violence against also women, but also specifically Indigenous women. So I have little statistics on the next slide, where again, to why are we having this too, as well as an example is why Indigenous women represent only 4% of all women in Canada, but Indigenous women make up 22% or 38 out of 173 women homicides perpetrated against women in 2017. So we make up 22% of homicides, and that was in 2017. I don't know if that's changed though recently too, because things change with this COVID. Aboriginal women are more than 3 times as likely to be a victim of male partner violence in Canada than non-Aboriginal women. 10% of Indigenous women with a paid job in Canada experienced sexual harassment in the past year, while among non-Indigenous women, 4% of women. So there's still a variance there. Expressed sexual harassment in the workplace in the past year, but this is 2017. So now I was thinking about this morning. So I wonder how the sexual harassment has changed now that everybody's working from home. So yeah, you can't harass me unless you cyberbully me. Although Aboriginal women are only 4% of the population of women in Canada, they make up 42% of the population in prison. And again, too, as well, that's where we work with here, even in Washington, is also prevention. And again, that's a whole research in itself, why they make up. And that goes back to now going back to things like poverty. We're just getting to understand intergenerational trauma. And so the intergenerational trauma tied to addictions and dysfunction, the addictions too as well, mental health. So it's so complex, but it's also connected. But I think it starts with awareness. Next, please. No, I'm getting really quick. So it's 2:15 and we're ending at 2:30. So there's still differences in understanding. Women are the life givers, men are the providers. The biggest contrast on contact was the role of women and men with the tribes on Turtle Island. It was very strange for the tribes here, for the men, for the women and children to take the man's name. When there was marriage here, they found that very strange. But that the newcomer context was that the male owned the women and children, therefore had the right to abuse them. And then I was saying to you, with this family violence, why was there so much violence in First Nations communities? Going back to this residential school, when the children were taken away, there was the use of corporal punishment in schools. And that was the norm too, even for non-native schools, was a spare the rod, spoil the child. And then when the children grew up, guess what? What skills did they learn? The non-native children went home to their parents, but the native children in residential schools, again, the norm was abuse. And so when they called people coming from the residential school the lost generation, because then they came out, they weren't sure how to be parents. And then we have, and you wonder why we have high rates of family violence. And that's again too as well starts with awareness and deprogramming, I think. Next, please. Really quickly, I talked to a lot of Climate Change Canada workers, and I said, see, again, there was a difference in understanding. And really quickly, I said, with the seed here, we come from Mother Earth and we go back to Mother Earth. Because a lot of times, too, as well, does violence and oppression is based on fear that there's not enough. Maybe that's another thing to look at as you're fasting. How has fear impacted my life? Fear that I won't have a job, fear that I'm going to run out of money, fear that I'm not lovable, fear that, but going back to this now, we worked in reciprocity too, that you give back and it'll come back to you. And when we're living, the tree provides oxygen for us and we give it carbon dioxide. So next time I go for a walk now and I blow at the trees, I said, I'm giving you carbon dioxide, but thank you for the oxygen. And see, I walk by myself here too. But anyway, but our understanding as Anishinaabe, because we were river people though, and my grandson gave me these acorns last fall. And it reminded me of that when we buried our ancestors, our loved ones back, we would wrap them in blankets and not in the wood today. And they were buried around like the watershed. And we would put a tree seed in the mouth. And it's that understanding of reciprocity that now the tree provided oxygen so that you breathe. Now I'm going back to Mother Earth, the original mother, and now I become part of the tree. My body becomes part of the tree. And I said that would make you more aware too, as well, in terms of when you harvest trees. We try not to cut trees like we did with contact with the timber resources. So it was just a different understanding, and how can we adapt that today too? And well, today, then that's why I put the graveyard at the bottom here, where everybody put in the same section here. Well, it's just a different understanding. It doesn't mean one is better than the other. It's just a different understanding that you explore. Next, please. And again, too, it's our housing. That's why you use climate change. Today you have like the suburbs. The only problem is our housing was temporary. Why? Our understanding is that we don't own anything. And we come from the earth, we return back to the earth. Our housing was temporary. So for us, we weren't known for the teepee, but there was an abundance of birch bark. It was regional specific. So we were known for the pikogan or wigwam. And they would use a living tree, one living tree as part of the structure to remind us that we're connected to the earth and it needs to go back to the earth. And today, though, yes, we have permanent structures, they're warm houses, but at the same time, how much of the ecosystems have we destroyed that the earth does, that the animals don't replenish? The other issue is also, I said that till we traveled by canoe. That was a different understanding, lean and mean. Today we travel by cars, but the only problem is now I think we have too many cars. And look at what we're doing to the air and the environment too as well. So it's not to say that one is better than the other, but I think too as well, I think we need solutions. And the solutions come with us coming together and learning new things like you're doing today, including your fast. Next, please. I just wanted to hurry up because I want 2 questions. The other one is, again, men are the fire keepers. There was the lightning teaching. The lightning is that it's a connection, it's the interconnection from the Father Sky and Mother Earth. And what are men too as well? They provide the spark of life, which is the connection between the male female. But also though too as well, I think what's going on here? Wait, I'll just close this here. But also though too as well, so the lightning, they would let the fire burn because it was that regeneration. But now when you have permanent structures, that's why they have the fire suppression. You see the plane there trying to stop the fires. But what the traditional understanding is after fire, though, the earth regenerates itself. And why I put that the blueberries is because also things like blueberries come back more abundant. And so when the lightning hits the earth too, it brings nitrogen to the earth, so it does fertilize the earth. And that's why they say men are the fire keepers. The other part is we would have our villages or clusters closer to the water, also too because of the fire, but also too as well that was our highways. So it's that difference in understanding. And yeah, here we are. Next, please. And my last is just that it's a reminder that this is a gathering. This is a structure that we worked with Manuel Baez, which is a professor in architecture for Canada's 150th birthday. He put the four benches representing the four colors of people coming to Turtle Island. The circle at the middle, the bottom picture is Turtle Island. I said it looks like a soccer. And he etched little rings in the tree because the tree records time. So it's our time together here with the four colors of people coming to Turtle Island. And then the outer is the 150 years in our growth outwards together. On top, he put the dream catcher, but the dream catcher represents the spider teachings. And the spider weaves the web of life, and that it's a reminder that everything is connected, that we're connected. We think we're insignificant, but we're not. We're interconnected with everything. And your connection, even coming here today, you're connecting with other people and learning. And I like the picture. I took this picture even showing that we're connected to the universe, that we're connected. We come from the stars and we do our journey here, our circle, our contribution. So I thank you today for coming, and I thank you for your contribution of fasting and listening to me. And if we have time, we have 6 minutes left. We can maybe open one or two. If Ethan has one or two questions, that would be great. And I also had a video, but I don't think we have time. I don't think I would talk so much. Any questions out there? If not, we can watch a video.
I don't have any questions in the chat right now. So if anybody wants to send questions along, we can answer them now.
If not,
watch video.
Yeah, if not, let's watch a video. And this is a video that was done by the Quebec in Wolf Lake. They're in the process of getting an Indigenous protective conservation area. And why I chose it too as well, because some of the women from Barrier Lake talk about the moose in there too, but it's also a little relaxed video, and you don't see my pictures or me talking again. So take it away, Ethan.
Are you able to see the YouTube page?
Yes.
Okay.
We are still on this land, minus a lot of knowledge. But if we look at it in present day, we're starting to allow our roots to grow and to know about our history, know about the animals, our language, and the names that we have that Nanabush has given us for us as Anishinaabe people.
There is some beautiful country back not too far from where we're standing right now. All this area where we're standing right now, it's all been covered over because there was a sawmill here back for quite a few years. The right location is 15-20 kilometers from now that was protected and set aside for us people to use the land.
I would say land management is of the utmost importance. I know culture and language is right up there, but for myself, I believe the culture is the land is the culture. A key project we have right now is our Akisibi project. And what is Akisibi? I mean, for us, it's to be able to develop our own indigenous protected conservation area. As an Algonquin nation as a whole, to try and have this Akisibi protected area that basically encompasses all of the Ottawa River watershed, which is our traditional territory, into a protected area. On a more larger partnership that we've been able to accomplish is with Nature Conservancy of Canada. So they've really been able to kind of help us get things rolling a little bit more quickly because of the expertise and guidance that they've been able to share with us. And I think it's just going to grow into other things.
We spend most of our time on the land, I would say. Probably like 90% of my day is just exploring the region in the area up and down the Ottawa River. It's also known as the Kichi-Sibi region by the Algonquin peoples. So our community works on a lot of conservation area projects. Right now we're in the Magasibi Conservation Area, also known as Wolf River. This area was established by Wolf Lake First Nation in 2008. We are roughly 200 kilometers squared around here in this conservation area. My uncle Tommy John helped work on this area. He helped establish all the boundaries and the trails and everything here.
This is a painting of an Anishinaabe woman along the Ottawa River in Deep River. Beside me, this is a mullein plant today. These protected areas are very important to us so that we can continue to harvest our traditional medicines and foods.
Consequently, there's no logging allowed right now in this area, and because it's also been turned into a conservation area. We try and do what is best for what we think is our people and our land use. Hopefully we can have some effect and at least be recognized for what we truly are, people of the land.
Our elders have expressed over the years that the population on the moose was declining. They are very sacred animals, and we have to respect them and give them time. It's a way of life for all the Anishinaabe people.
That loss of forest, the loss of biodiversity has had a profound impact on people from Temiskaming First Nation, and there's such a need to protect the forest around here. I think we're really starving for it. We want to get community members back out into the forest and using our forest and using all of the foods that we can gather from the forest.
Now I think we're trying to strengthen that traditional knowledge as youth in the community, and that's part of our goal as well, is to include youth whenever we can, going into schools and employing them for harvesters.
Because the forest has had a long-standing relationship with First Nations culture. It's interconnected, I guess you could say, and you can't really separate ourselves from the forest. So like the forest has had a really strong impact upon who we are as First Nations people, and like food from the forest has been basically our way of survival and our way of passing on knowledge from one generation to the other to us.
A big part of our identity. It's super important to be out on the territory so that our people can thrive again.
Okay, so with that, I think we can bring our session to a close today. Before we, head separate ways, I just wanted to Verna, first off, thank you so much. Wanted to just express the utmost gratitude to you for joining us again this year for the Moosehide Campaign Day. And I also wanted to say miigwech for not only sharing the essential context of this relationship that exists between peoples, but for also, pushing each and every one of us here in this call to consider our own roles and what responsibilities that we need to uphold both individually and collectively, as we discuss these enormous intergenerational challenges that we face and, you know, collectively for identifying that healing is relational, you know, and completely linked to the land. So with that, I also wanted to say a huge thank you, Chimigwech, to all of you for participating in this workshop and for your commitment to moving forward in better ways. And before I hand it off to Verna, in case she has any closing notes for you, I just wanted to say as a reminder that if you are in Victoria, we'll be beginning to gather for the walk to end violence. So the walk will begin at 12 o'clock noon BC time at Mungo Martin House on the corner of Belleville Street and Douglas Street. They'll be walking down to the lawn of the BC Legislative Assembly, where there will be ceremony and speeches until around 1 p.m. So for around an hour. And for those of you who are not in Victoria, we'll be live streaming this event through our event microsite, which Derek, if you can throw that in the chat, that'd be appreciated. And we'll also be live streaming a fast breaking ceremony which will have the calling of witnesses and closing remarks beginning at around 8 o'clock p.m. Pacific time. So we'd be really honored to have you join us for this. For those of us who might be in later time zones, there will be a pre-recorded fast breaking ceremony available on our website as well. So with that, I'm just going to throw a slide up. Verna, if you have any final words, I'm just going to throw a slide up here for people to put some input into the chat. But outside of that, thank you.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, no, I just have, somebody wrote a question about, do I have any suggestions to help people, those who are using violence? And I thought of this, when I was reading that, I thought of this session I did a number of years ago, and this youth got up because it was on violence, it was on lateral violence, and he goes, how do you get them to stop? And he was so mad in the audience. He goes, how do you get them to stop? And I said, you know, at the end of the day, you don't control the other person. You can't control their how they react. But what you do control is how you react to them. And sometimes too as well, your reaction is sometimes non-reaction to them. And also too as well, sometimes too as well, your safety comes first of all. And number two is sometimes too as well, it's recognizing that you don't control the other person. And sometimes too as well, as the elders say too as well, is sometimes all you can do is pray for them that they also find their own healing. Because a lot of times too as well, this violence is also fear-based. So miigwech.
Okay. Oh, good, Verna. If anybody else has any questions, feel free to just post them there. But otherwise, our session here has come to a close, and feel free to continue posting your responses to these two questions in the chat as well.
Oh, miigwech, Ethan.